If we take a look at your HTTP directory, you'll find a directory called Middleware. This is our next core concept to review. If we take a look, we have a number of them that are included out of the box. And we can also see this kernel class, the HTTP kernel. And there's lots of references to middleware and middleware groups. Again, this is a component to Laravel that can be a little scary at first, but it's just a word, and I promise you, it's really simple to understand, and you're going to get a lot of use out of it. So come along for the ride, and I think it'll make good sense. All right, and then we have a section for route middleware. So it sounds like the user enters, so to speak, your Laravel application through these middleware that will automatically fire. Notice, these middleware are run during every request to your application. I like to think of middleware as layers of an onion. So if you want to get to the core of the onion, you first have to peel back every layer. It's kind of like that. So each one of these middleware represents one layer of that onion. And each layer has the opportunity to do any number of checks. It has the opportunity to put something in the session. It has the opportunity to cache. It has the opportunity to maybe authorize or authenticate you. It has the opportunity to redirect you somewhere entirely. Or in other words, you can do anything you want here. Take a look at this authenticate middleware here. And we only see one method, but that can be a little misleading. I'll show you that in a minute. First, we can see get the path the user should be redirected to when they are not authenticated. And we only see one method here, which can be a little misleading, but you'll see that it does extend the authentication middleware. So let's visit this file instead. I'll say illuminate, we're going to a middleware directory, and it's called authenticate. Now, every middleware includes a method called handle. Or in other words, when you peel back each layer of the onion, in this case, a middleware, it will try to call a method named handle. This is your place to receive a request, review it, modify it, tweak it, change it, redirect somewhere else, or if everything checks out, pass it on to the next layer of the onion. And that next layer will have the exact same ability. So it sounds like this particular middleware authenticates the request. Okay, notice here, if this auth guard check. So it sounds a little confusing, but all we're doing is saying check to see if the user is authenticated. And if they're not, we're going to throw an exception. All right, so it sounds like this is a middleware that we apply conditionally if we want to assert that you must be signed in order to access a particular page. Okay? You don't need to understand any of this code. That's the basics of this middleware. You must be authenticated to continue forward. Now, if I go back to that kernel class, let's look for authenticate. You'll see that it's included as a route middleware right here, and it's associated with a key called auth. All right, so now it's starting to make a little more sense, because at the tail end of the last episode, we learned that in the home controller, there was this section right here, this middleware auth. So notice this key matches up with this, if I scroll down, route middleware group. It's starting to make sense now. If you need to demand that a user be signed into your application to view a particular page, this is the middleware you reach for. Let's go ahead and try it out. If I visit our routing file, you'll see the URI is /home. All right, /home. And notice it redirected me to the login page because I'm not signed in. But let's sign in. And now you can see I can access that page. All right, let's log out one more time. I'm going to switch back to our home controller and comment this section out in our controller. Okay, now anyone can access that page because we're no longer protecting it. Neat. Now, as it turns out, we can apply middleware from a controller or from your routes file. And I find that developers tend to disagree on where they prefer it, so it's entirely up to you. Yes, you can add it in your controller's constructor, or you can add it at the end of your routing declaration. Apply the middleware called auth, and we'll get the exact same thing. See? Now imagine that instead of this, maybe it's a join page or a sign-up page. Well, sometimes you need to do the opposite. Sometimes you want to say, well, you can only visit this page if you're not authenticated. So for example, if you already have an account and you're signed in, we don't really need to let you see the sign-up page because you're already signed up. Okay, so it sounds like we need the opposite in that case. And you'll see we have a middleware for that very thing. redirect if authenticated. So take a look. If the current user is already signed in, well, we don't need to continue forward. We don't need to pass it on to any other layer of the onion before we get to the core of our application. We're going to redirect immediately and exit out of this current request. Now, if we go to the kernel, you'll see once again that is a route middleware here called guest. Nice and readable. All right, let's give it a shot. First, let's see it in action. So Safari, I'm going to go to sign up. Okay, and again, ignore this, we haven't updated the view, but this represents some kind of sign up page. All right, now if we log in, Joe, there we go. And if I visit sign up again, he or she can still access this imaginary sign up page. So I'm now going to add the guest middleware. And if I switch back and refresh, it redirects us. In this case, we get a 404, but it's trying to redirect us to the home page. And in this case, we get a 404, but only because we updated that route. But this is correct. It didn't allow us to visit the sign up page because we were authenticated. So it redirects us somewhere else. So now, when you think about this middleware, think of it however you want. I use the onion approach. Some people use the filter approach. So when we say middleware guest, we're saying, all right, filter it down so only those who meet this condition may continue forward. Or in other words, only guests may continue forward. Or only authenticated users may continue forward. Now, if you're curious about all the various route middleware you can apply, just take a look at your application kernel. Here's all of the ones that are included out of the box, and this is going to take you a really long way. You can even include basic authorization. For example, only load this page if the user can edit this particular project or post. So you really do have a lot of flexibility there. Now you can add we reviewed guest. You can ensure that an email has been verified before you load the page. And of course, you can implement throttling. So if you want to say you can only request this endpoint a total of 30 times in 1 minute, you can do that out of the box in Laravel. And as it turns out, you can even create your own when you're ready for it. You'll find a make middleware here. PHP Artisan make middleware. Maybe we want one for development purposes that will log all queries. All right, you could create that. And this would be a global middleware that would run for every single request. So for example, if I were to say, hi there, and if I switch back to Safari, well, remember, it's not going to run. Yes, you've created this class, but you haven't declared it within your kernel. So if we scroll down, if I want this new log queries middleware to run for every single request, I could include it here. Okay, now if I give it a refresh, it will die and dump that string. So again, it's clear you can do anything you want within a middleware. Maybe you want to ensure that something is within the cache. You could do that. Maybe you need to check some kind of condition within the request. And if it doesn't meet your condition, you're going to redirect the user somewhere else. No problem. Or maybe you're looking into the session to check something related to the user. That would be fine as well. Maybe you want to force SSL on the PHP end rather than through Nginx or Apache. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could do that if necessary. Again, a middleware is where you would record that logic. So the only confusing thing here is, remember, there's two different types of middleware. You have your global middleware that will run for every single request into your application. And then you have your route middleware. Think of these as your route-specific middleware or opt-in middleware. They should not be applied for every single request. They should only be applied when you request it. So in this case, authentication, you may not need authentication for every single page load. So it makes no sense for that to be a global middleware. Instead, you apply it when and if you need to. And that's it. That's all you need to know about middleware. So yes, initially a scary term, but the bright side is it's not that confusing to understand.